Hey guys, so we're going to talk about the monarchy. Um, I've got some Kronenberg, which for those of you who don't know beer, is kind of funny because Kronenberg's a really expensive beer, and it's like, oh, the monarchy, luxury, blah blah blah. But I didn't really want to talk about the monarchy in relation to Kronenberg because I don't know if there's much of a history behind it. What I wanted to talk about, first of all, full disclosure, my position on the monarchy, I think it's stupid and useless and serves no point. But at the same time, I can't say I care that much. Like, I struggle to think of, I can't think of a ideal Britain as having the monarchy, but at the same time, I think in regards to achieving an ideal Britain, there are just so many things that outweigh the monarchy. And I don't think that a Britain with the monarchy wouldn't exactly be ideal. I just think if you were building a country from the ground up, thinking in terms of what would make that country ideal, why would you have a monarchy? The other point I want to make, the other point I want to make, is that a monarchy doesn't make or break a democratic functioning government, in my opinion. And while this might sound like a bit of a point in favour of the monarchy, my point is that a lot of people stress the idea of alternatives to the monarchy, which is a bit peculiar, because the monarchy doesn't really need an alternative. And the point is that you could very much build on our democratic system and the way our government functions without getting rid of the monarchy. You could introduce, I believe, you could introduce a president and still have a monarchy. Now the question is it still a monarchy if they're not officially the head of state? I think that's an interesting question, especially in terms of whether or not it might be a good idea to have a system like a monarchy, but the monarchy isn't the head of state. And I think a monarchy should be defined as a family that is officially a part of government, that has that is funded by the state, something like that. That would be a good definition for a monarchy as I see it. And in that case, I think you could build around that, or you could take away from that without removing the idea of the monarchy. And also, you could get rid of the monarchy and keep everything about our current system. There's nothing really that you need for. There's nothing that you need. Yeah, there's nothing that you need the monarchy for. So I don't think all of this discussion about what's the alternative makes any sense. The other point I wanted to talk about is that a lot of people talk about tradition and how we'd have to take away so much of Britain to get rid of the monarchy. I don't really think so, because the argument would be, you'd have to get rid of the royal crest on everything. And I don't see that being the case, because it's a part of our history. I think we could keep all of our monarchical, I don't think that's an actual word, it might be monarchical, I'll go with monarchist, all of our monarchist imagery and iconography without getting rid of the monarchy. I think another point, the point I was thinking about was people who stress the importance of tourism. On this point, there's a really good response to CGP Grey's video on the monarchy. CGP Grey makes a video where he basically argues that the monarchy is a good thing, and all of his arguments are bullshit, honestly. The response is basically pointing out that the Palace of Versailles takes in, I believe, 1.6 million more visitors It's 2.6 million to about 1 million to the Castle of Windsor, and the Palace of the Louvre, I believe, gets about, I can't remember the exact statistics, I'm afraid, but about 6 million visitors relative to about 1.5 million visitors to Buckingham Palace. So the idea that we wouldn't get as many visitors if we turned the if we put the royal residence to a different use, I think is complete bullshit. And if you want a really good example of this, in the UK we have a charity, I believe, called the, I don't know if it can be considered a charity, because it kind of functions as a business, but I believe it's a very non-profit business, called the National Trust. And the National Trust basically buys a lot of the old houses, the old mansions in the UK, and opens them up to the public. And you can buy a National Trust membership, which means you can go to any of those houses. And I really wish I knew the statistics on this. Unfortunately, I'm sort of just making this video a bit spur of the moment, because I witnessed a bit of an argument in the kitchen of my house about the monarchy, and it really got me thinking. I wasn't that involved in the argument, because, like I say, I don't care that much. I just think there are a lot of bad arguments made for it. But the National Trust, just to put it, to provide some understanding of how much money it makes enough money to buy mansions from opening up these mansions to the public and allowing the public to visit them. And I think that Buckingham Palace would bring in many more visitors if you could actually walk around it. Because I've been to Buckingham Palace and it's shit. You just, like, I don't even remember seeing Buckingham Palace. I just remember seeing the gate. And if I could have actually gone into Buckingham Palace, let me put it this way. I like to plan out a lot of trip ideas in my head. And I've considered, day trips to London and things like that. Because where I live, as opposed to university live, is about 15-20 minutes by train into London. So you can, I could visit it really easily. And to be honest, none of the royal stuff ever crosses my mind as something I'd really like to see, but it would definitely be something I'd like to see if I could actually go into Buckingham Palace. So I think we would actually increase our tourism if we got rid of the monarchy. The final point I really wanted to consider is the fact that the people talk about the monarchy as a cultural icon, and I find this a bit peculiar because of the extent of celebrity worship within our culture. There are lots of families who are much more renowned, have drawn much more public interest in the royal family. So it feels like a bit of a weird argument to make that we should keep them because they draw in so much public appeal. Because by that logic, should we pay the Kardashians millions of state pounds, 40 million state pounds? I don't think so. And the last point I wanted to make is people who talk about how we can't get rid of the monarchy because all the land they hold, it gives us money. Which is ridiculous, because that's a bit like saying we can't get rid of the monarchy because it would be really weird if we had to go to the monarchy to approve a legislation when they weren't officially a part of government. Using the current power the monarchy holds to defend the current power the monarchy holds makes no sense. The monarchy only holds all those businesses because they are tax exempt. And one of the really interesting points I think made in the video that was responding to CGP Grey is that one of the biggest losses of money is the fact that we allow the royals to hold on to businesses that they are shit at managing. and we either bail them out directly, or we at least give them tax cuts, and you know, their businesses would be much better if they actually faced the economic scrutiny of the free market. If, when they completely failed, they were disbanded, or the control over them was disbanded. So, you know, we lose a huge amount of money from that. Ultimately, it's a bit tough, because I think, just on the point of tourism, like I say, I don't think there is an actual defence of the monarchy to be made with tourism, but if you look at something like the Louvre, they've actually put that house to good use, and I think there are lots of more productive things that we could do to make our country more attractive to tourists. We could renovate central London, and we could renovate other cities. You know, we could, I've always thought about building like a massive Disneyland in the UK. Not an actual Disneyland, but something like a cross between Disneyland and Centre Parks. I think that would be a good use of the UK's money, UK government's money, if that was placed somewhere in northern England, where obviously very few people visit, because tourism is not a huge part of the UK's economy, and I never see tourists. Ever. Like, I talk to Americans and they say that they see a lot of tourists, especially when Americans, if I meet an American online or in person, and if I meet them in person, then chances are that in the UK, they'll ask me if I've ever been to America, and I'll say no, but I'd like to visit America on these holidays or something like that, because it goes back to the fact that I like to plan out holidays. And they'll say, oh yeah, I see British people there all the time, and I think, maybe I've got bad memory, but I don't remember ever hearing an American accent in London, ever. And obviously it's quite difficult to tell because London's so diverse that, I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of Chinese tourists there, but there's also lots of Chinese people in London. But ultimately, our tourism performance is pretty lackluster to begin with. So, well, you know, if you're going to talk about tourism as if it's a massive problem that needs to be addressed, then okay, let's build tourism attractions. Let's fund the National Trust more and get them to actually invest money in preserving all of the properties that they own, which they do very well. And that's ultimately my point. I know this video is a bit ranty, and while that's partially because I've drunk quite a bit and it was inspired by a drunken argument, it's also because it's kind of a complicated issue, you know, because it's one of those things where the defense of it is almost drunkenly in its nature. The defense of the monarchy is, I don't want to get rid of the monarchy. And the thing is, as someone who actually kind of considers that a legitimate defense and doesn't advocate outright taking away the monarchy, it's sort of, I have to negotiate around that attitude of just, let's not get rid of the monarchy. So no matter what I say about how there's no point keeping the monarchy, at the same time, we could, you know, it's not enough of an interference that we couldn't do everything else, basically everything I've mentioned in this video, making our government more democratic, investing more in tourism, I guess arguably the one point would be we couldn't open up Buckingham Palace, but it's ultimately it runs into the fact that tradition is fundamentally quite irrational, but then at the same time, when you approach things strictly rational and assume that all historical, cultural, sociological dimensions to humanity don't exist, are you then being equally irrational? And I would argue that you are being equally irrational if you just act like every single person should live like Spock, which I know, sorry. Rest in peace, Leonard Nimoy. But that's why you have to approach it with a bit of a flippy-floppy attitude, as you do with many things. So, bye.